Good morning, everyone. Karibuni sana to this webinar today on this wonderful day of 18th of September 2020. It's always a pleasure to be hosting all of you. My name is Sefa Zokov, your usual suspect, your usual host, and I'm the founder and leader at Cyber in Africa, a wonderful partner and supporter of Bridges. We call ourselves the voice of Africa cybersecurity because we deal in media for cybersecurity. We create content and run programs and other things. And we support a lot the ecosystem and particularly Bridges. Again, karibuni sana, and in this webinar, we are going to consider and discuss security awareness. It's one of the big topics that everyone talks about, and it's very fundamental at the same time. And today we're going to focus a lot on how to build security awareness. So in this conversation, I look forward to focusing on the hows, focusing on the strategic thinking, focusing on the leadership and other aspects of security awareness. With me, I have three gentlemen who will be giving us insights and their thoughts around the topic. And I will be asking them to introduce themselves in a little while. But in the meantime, I want to ask our audience today that engage with us in the chat section, ask your questions, feel free to seek clarification on any other thing. If you have some interesting comments as well, put them in the chat section, and we'll be watching out for those and bringing them into the conversation so that all of us can have an interactive next 1 hour and a half. Okay, as well, in case there are any technical hitches, we ask you to stick with us because they can always happen anytime. And I hope that all of us are going to learn and enjoy. Quickly, you can follow us in the links that I've shared in the chat section. This is going to share a lot more links for the panelists and the LBJs and others. So feel free to connect with us, follow us on Twitter, on LinkedIn, and in other places. Let's get to know each other and let's keep talking. Okay, so getting into today's conversation, I would like to ask my guests to introduce themselves, and I will start with the host. I'm not sure if the host is here today, Steve. I don't think he's around. Yeah, so I will start with Mr. Misoi, then I will go to Kevin, then I'll go to David. Mogoi, Mr. Robert Mogoi.
Just before we start, right?
Yes, Lisa.
Steve may not be able to join us today, but we are very excited to have the panelists with us and to also have the participants with us. So feel free to engage with us, share your comments, share your pointers on the chat section, and we'll be glad to answer them. So I can let Robert introduce himself and the rest of the panelists. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Good morning. Happy to be here again. Cephas, how can you call me Misoi? Sure.
I am sorry about that.
For a while there, I'm like, where is Misoi in the panel? But yes, thank you. My name is Robert Karioki Mogoi. I work for Chai Sako. And it's a pleasure again to be here. And I tell people every day, if you are keen enough, you will learn something. So I'm here to learn as much as I am willing to share with what I know. Thank you.
Fantastic. Kevin?
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to be with you. It's a pleasure to have coming in together to discuss what are these matters of the security that we can, uphold and, build awareness in terms of building security across organizations. So I'm Kevin Saitoti Sibiu. I work with Kenya Bankers, try to protect the bad guys in this place. I'll say I'm self-driven, cybersecurity enthusiastic. I love to do more about security, research about security, risk management, networking, talk of compliance, cybersecurity, talk of privacy. My key focus is purely on emerging technologies and helping organizations to be able to to mitigate all these threats that are coming. So it's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to share. Thank you so much.
Yes, so Kevin, we lost you there for a moment, but thank you and welcome to the Yelbige's webinar series. Mr. David?
Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. My name is David Njoga. I'm a cyber security governance expert at ICRAL Innovation Hub. ICRAL Innovation Hub is a community that innovates, develops, and mentors cybersecurity professionals to meet the dire demand for the Kenyans cyberspace. So our core business at ICRAL, we say we are the first and the only cybersecurity innovation hub in Africa. So really our core focus is on training on cybersecurity, mentorship of professionals, both novice and seasoned, as well as developing and incubating innovations that will meet Kenya's cybersecurity requirements. I look forward to a fruitful discussion because the topic for the day is actually what is my bread and butter every day. Thank you.
Oh, fantastic. So hope you're going to have a taste of that bread and butter today. Okay, so thanks, gentlemen, and let's slide into it. So I always love to start with the basics for a good while now, for several reasons. One, I don't want to assume that all of us understand the basics, the terminologies, and the concepts around the topic. And then as well, it's great to have the fundamental thinking to some of these topics, because at the end of the day, we always told, let's go back to basics, right? So yeah, just a quick one, and you can do a round of responses from the three of you, around three questions. So one is, what is culture? And then two, what is security culture? Just give us your own thinking and perspectives from your experiences and knowledge. I'll start with David.
Thank you very much, and for the honors of allowing me to break the ice. And I also want to put it basically, just like you also say you prefer. Culture really is, what somebody is. It's just a way of life. It's a way in which, people choose to do their things in an agreed way that is creates harmony, in a way that, is coherent with the other members within an ecosystem. Now, in the perspective of cybersecurity, we always talk about the end-to-end information system comprising of, people, processes, and technology. So culture in this aspect is, these people that participate or that interact with information systems, what are they made of? What are their beliefs? What are their thoughts? What are their ways of life? What do they cherish? Okay, what do they believe in? As a team, and so on and so forth. What is their way of doing things? What we call the modus operandi. And I like putting it straight in the context of the core values. And I'm sure all of us who are working in established organizations have certain core values. And some of the core values that I would call that would really embed the security culture are those that emanate around, individuals, ideas, social behavior that would, enhance the protection of the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of information assets, and the other parameters that can influence other behavior of our colleagues, the people we interact with in terms of the supply chain, and so on. So from a high level, I would like to, put into perspective culture just as that social fabric that is embedded in the people within the context of information system. Thank you.
Yeah, fascinating. You've hit on several points that are core, part and parcel, and at the core of culture. Robert, you want to chime in on the security aspect of culture?
I wish I could have started with culture itself, plainly.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
I want to describe culture, not to define it. Culture is, for example, when I introduce myself as a karaoke, everybody will assume I am from Mount Kenya. Okay? What is that makes you conclude that? That is culture. Culture is when you will obviously see a post in the newspaper, in the job links everywhere, where looking for a CEO of an organization equals to 20 years of experience, CPAK, all those things. That is culture. Culture is when, as a CIO, I sit in my office and end up allocating an intern in registry, an old PC that has got Windows XP. That is culture. Culture is when you'll find the board of directors or the organ that makes decision, especially on IT projects, will go ahead and do that in the absence of the one in charge of IT. Culture is when the one in finance or charged with the finance department ends up deciding the amount of budget to allocate an IT project. And finally, so that I just move to security culture, culture is when we assume that cybersecurity is an IT function. Cephas, that is how I can simply put culture. So culture is something that over time, you end up just sliding into it and you move without really thinking too much. Now, coming to what you've asked me, what is a security culture? Or how can I describe it? Again, I could say there is the right culture and the wrong culture. So the right culture is when every person in an organization, that is the unit, every person in an organization reacts the same way, the same way, but the correct way to a security issue. I don't know how many of you don't enjoy choreographed dancing, where you have group of people. They can be 10, 20. And when they move one direction, they all move that way. That is very interesting. So I am seeing, I will wish that security culture, the right security culture is, for example, when you receive an unsolicited email, what the CIO will do is the same thing a cleaner will do. What the CEO will do is the same thing an intern who has come to the organization and been there for a month or two will do. Asante.
I love your analogy about the choreographed dance. I think it's a very real example of how, not sure where that noise is coming. It's a very real example of how a group of people, let's say in an organization, can actually move in the same way, in the same fashion, in the same direction, with a common purpose. That hey, if you're moving to the left, you're all moving to the left. But I think that really makes the foundation of culture, where you've given the different examples, which boils down to the idea of the way we do things. Okay, if we do one thing today and we keep doing it tomorrow and the next day, it becomes a culture. You know, it started, it develops, it's nurtured. Whether it's actually good or bad culture is still culture. You see, and Kevin here from a security perspective, because you do that a lot. I mean, how do you see culture being developed or being nurtured in organizations, for example, like yours? Kevin, can you hear me? Okay, I think we've lost Kevin. Okay, so a couple of things you have mentioned: beliefs, norms, values, behaviors, aspects of attitude and cognition, and all of these things that form that describe the word culture, or the concept of culture, really applies to security, and at the same time it applies to organizational management. If you look at organization culture, but there's something that is very foundational to the whole security culture idea, is that cybersecurity is everyone's business, and this is a statement that is thrown out there that I think all of us know about it. But let's try and demystify it today, and I'll start with David. What is your sense about cybersecurity being everyone's business? Because when you're talking of culture, you're talking of shared ideas, shared norms, shared attitudes and values, and etc. among a group of people. You see, and these very people, they're the same people who of whom we tell cybersecurity is all of you as business. You know, how do you see the sense of this statement?
Oh, okay, thank you very much. And let me start by making an analogy, with the currently, let me call it demeaning COVID-19 pandemic, where, maintaining or observing the COVID protocols becomes important. So look at it whereby a situation whereby, a household that is, housing, say, 15 members. If one person maybe goes out to the public, does not observe the COVID-19 protocols, gets the infection, when he or she comes back home, we can be sure, we're almost certain that, the other members of the family might be infected. So what we are saying is that in terms of cybersecurity, it is really an individual's undertaking. Okay, what this implies that we put it in the context of the cyberspace. The cyberspace is an interconnection of systems, networks, people, processes, and so on. Both from a very, very basic local area up to even a wider global network, and so on and so forth. So every player within the cyberspace, must be responsible, or the irresponsibilities of every player within the cyberspace is likely to compromise cybersecurity. So this requires that all of us need to adopt a common approach. Every person needs to be self-driven, or internet-driven. We need to understand what can really go wrong when we become vulnerable to let our systems, as basic as our mobile phones, to be compromised. Okay, we need to look at a common goal. In a community, of course, each of us lives in an ecosystem, from a family setup to a company setup to a national and a global setup. If we all appreciate the fact that compromising an information system through a cyber attack can be very devastating, and we have seen very huge impacts based on compromising of information systems. For example, if compromising database of patients at KNH, through omission of one medical or one health records officer, if that will compromise the privacy of over tens of thousands of patients' records at Kenyatta National Hospital, then that single act of omission by one person, will bring all the other stakeholders' data or privacy, into compromise. So it's important that each player within an information processing organization or center appreciates that we have a common goal to protect the cyberspace, or to protect the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of information. So because the requirement, I mentioned the people element as a very important component of an information system. We need to appreciate, the collective effort, okay? That all of us, if we hold hands together to form a cycle, and if that cycle is to be used to, say, transmit, say, electricity, or transmit water, or whatever that can flow through that cycle, any compromise to the continuity of that arrangement will compromise the cybersecurity. So that understanding, that appreciation of collective effort and synergy is very pertinent. Then, if you look at, let me relate it with one of a popular model that is used in the industry to really demystify how cyber attacks can harm a system. This is the cyber harm model, and the model talks about the various players of an ecosystem. Whether the harm from a ransomware attack, or from compromising of a password of a bank, and so on and so forth. Whether the harm, the impact will be on an individual, it will be on an organization, or it will be of a national or global scale. So this is really what makes cybersecurity everyone's business, because it's only through appreciating that I need to do what I need to do, and everyone else need to do what they need to do in order to safeguard our information infrastructure, and also to provide that common assurance, that predictability that our systems are okay, because each member or each player within the ecosystem is doing what they're supposed to do. That's my 2 cents in terms of demystifying that assertion.
I mean, that's a lot of sense. Thank you, David. Responsibility, collective responsibility, but then it has to boil down to personal responsibility. And this really reminds me of the approach of personal cybersecurity. I mean, it's one of the things that is being touted much when it comes to building culture, that you have to personalize cybersecurity and build personal responsibility as part of the process. I'm not sure if Kevin is here, but Robert, any thoughts around how we can really bring security, promote security as an everyone's issue, but at the same time make it very personal, because it's about every individual.
Thank you, Cephas. If you remember, when I was defining or when I was giving an explanation of what culture is, one of the things I said is it is not an ICT function or responsibility or obligation. It is all of us. Actually, there is a guy who has written a book on the same, called Scott Scober. Cybersecurity is everyone's business, and his target audience is not corporations, big corporations, is everyone, including, the guys who deal with, they are the CEO, the worker, and, you know, one-man guitar in an organization. So why does it, or what does it mean that it is a collective responsibility? Like I've heard David say, the weakest link will allow a bridge on security. So you are as strong as your weakest link in terms of security. And it is I like the heading culture. It is only the right culture, the right security culture that will help us, will minimize attacks, will minimize the impacts of a breach when it happens. How do we end up with the right security culture? The right security culture doesn't just come, you know. I was actually looking at this word, everyone is business. And I remember when I was a bit younger, I think I used to feel like people were in my business a lot. And I could, you know, use this word more often than not, that keep off my business. It is not your business. How I dress, how, you know. As you get older, you realize actually that was a lot of ignorance that was speaking. Because yes, it is everyone is business, how you behave. Because how you behave affects the people you are related to. It will be called so and so son. That guy works for Chai Sacco, you know. That CS from Kenya, you know. So the way you carry yourself is everybody's business, though sometimes it's not directly. So how do we cultivate this culture? How do we get to the right culture? The right culture, as I've said, it is a lot of things, but training has to be there. For example, the example David, my brother David gave about the impact of a record leak, a hospital record leak in where? In an, you know, number one, it can cause a lot of stigma. You know, you've just seen COVID when it started. The way when you were tested and found positive, there was a lot of stigma around it, you know. So if a record leaks, for example, there is stigma to the person it has leaked about. Two, if it leaks and some people use that to blackmail, you know, say, Robert, if you dare stand to be the president of Kenya, we are going to reveal that you are HIV positive. It is an example. Or you've seen the other day when Trump was carrying a glass of water and he had to use his left hand to help him carry the glass. People said the guy is sick. Can you imagine if there was a record to collaborate that? Then he will be deemed unfit to run for president the second term. So those are some of the, you know, the impacts that a breach or a security lapse can cause. And the person who allows intentionally or unintentionally for that leak need to know the impact. Because if you know the impact, then you will end up being more careful or just not being sloppy to allow it to happen. or even when you are given money to allow it to happen, then maybe you will think twice before you just take 10 shillings to allow that to happen. Yeah, so and why is it everybody? I look at the most common security attacks that we have, phishing, for example. Phishing is perpetuated through mail. Who in this era and age that doesn't use mail? You know, I've seen even the people who say they are not IT savvy have to get an email from KRA to, you know, basically speaking, everybody uses email. So that means you are a candidate for an attack. How many of you have not received texts saying, you know, if you are a parent, Dad, my box was broken into, you know, that common thing. And we just go ahead and say that is from committee. How did we end up there? It's because we have now built a culture, knowing, why don't I call the school first? Or, you know, send the money and then you can ask later on. No, it's because we have learned and we have trained ourselves and we have now formed a culture that, you know, you don't rush to these things. Malware spying. How many people will just allow a dongle or a flash disk into their computer without asking, can I scan it first? You know, simple things. Until we build such a culture in our people, in our organizations, then we are candidates for attacks anytime, any day.
Yeah, fascinating. Personal behavior or personal cultures can actually affect a group of a community culture, or, you know, let's say in an organization, and that's a very powerful point. And it really puts the nails on the head on why we need to be able to promote the sense of personal responsibility when it comes to the general organizational culture and specifically the security culture, because again, you are as strongest as your weakest link. Kelvin, if you can hear me, I can't see you on video, but if you can hear me, do you want to chime in on you know, the whole aspect of culture and how you see it fundamentally from a security perspective? You know, reflecting on the ideas of personal responsibility, on the ideas of you know, how do we entrench, you know, a secure culture in our people?
Perfect. That's a very good question. Thank you for that. I just have an issue with the camera. I think I can just proceed with the audio. I think that is okay. If you can hear me.
Yes, it's okay.
I look at it from, you know, it's a very dangerous, you know, argument to manipulate, because I can use an analogy of a cliche to say, for example, is there a fine line between something everybody is, you know, between something being, you know, everybody's responsibility, and the same things becoming nobody's responsibility? Because if we don't calculate these things to make sure that we don't attach the culture to people, then whose responsibility is that? So what I mean here is the key here is to, you know, to acknowledge that while each employee may have a role to play in securing the firm's asset, because the moment they get into the organization, they have the asset with them. COVID is here with us. People are working from home. They are always working with these assets. So how do we define these roles from functions to function? And failure to communicate these functions to the employees will not, you know, be able to inculcate that culture of a cyber, effect in terms of what that asset can cause to the organization network. I'll give you, for example, telling a HR staff who receive CVs by email every day not to open an attachment. For me, I feel like it's just a waste of time, because that is a function they do. So how do you help them to understand that when youth receive a certain kind of attachment, you don't need to open them. But to answer your question in terms of the responsibility of everybody, I always like to put this like in a generic and say, it has to be structured approach from, from the board level. The excos really need to own this thing. So they don't need to look at security from a mere perspective of an operational matter. So they need to know exactly, first of all, this is the culture we hold, the culture of cybersecurity. How do we do awareness? How do we make sure that it is a top-down approach? Then look at the organization, the HR sits here. It should also be involved in key responsibilities and accountabilities to make sure that that security aspect has, it has been loaded into the staff culture from the time they work, from the time they perform their function. So for me, I look at it from, let it be on like the value the company is playing, the value the company that it's upholding, to help the staff understand clearly what the cybersecurity is and how the excos can be able to even do some investment in terms of creating awareness. So that is why I say it is not a job for the ICT. It's a job for everybody. Everybody know that, just like Robert and David have said, a click on an email will make, some sort of disruption to the business and to make sure that this business is not accessible to, to the customers. So again, look at it from, the point of the HR and the middle management. What are their key roles in making sure that these things is, the cybersecurity, responsibility has been, calculated in a horizontal manner inside the organization, so that we know exactly what are these set good practices that the staff need to comply with. Because it will just be a waste of time putting in so much resource in the hardware and the people have not been, they are not having the culture. It is just like, waking up, coming to an organization, but you have a disconnection with it. You just come and see an email and you click, you don't even care. It will actually be a waste of time to have, heavy investment as far as cybersecurity is concerned, but you are not embodying the culture. So the culture revolves around three things. It must come to people. It must come to the technology you're putting in place. It must come to the processes that you are embedding into your business generally. So that's how I look at the culture.
Well, interesting. Who should own then security culture in an organization? Kevin?
Come again, please.
Who do you think should own the security culture in an organization?
For me, I will just pin it to the executive. But again, it is everybody's responsibility, because if the executive are owning it, but the staff are not owning it, we at the end of the day will be compromised. So from a compliance perspective, it is the excos, but when it comes to organizational culture, it is everybody.
Interesting. You're giving us a nice pivot to this conversation. We're looking at security culture engagement at the strategic level, and I'll bring David here. You need to talk to ESCOs. You need to push the idea that cybersecurity is important. But one of the aspects of cybersecurity is actually building culture. And culture is more like an art in a way. It's more like a soft science in a way. It's not like hardware. You can go to the shop and buy hardware and come and fix, and it works. But then culture has all these different aspects and the complexity of everything. And then, of course, people are just people, people are complex. People come from all these different cultures and they have all these different ideas. How do you engage the strategic level, the excos and the board when it comes to security culture?
Okay, Safas, let me respond to that by appreciating what Kevin has mentioned. Yeah, indeed, the responsibility, the ownership of culture is actually cutting across the entire organization from the top to the lowest level. Now, I like talking about, this thing they call wenye kampuni na wana kampuni, okay? or wenye nchi na wananchi. So the executive will normally set the tone for the culture for the organization, okay, through the normal strategic instruments such as, declarations of the mission of that organization, the vision, the core values, and so on and so forth. Now, let me take a cue at, for example, the Ministry of ICT of the Republic of Kenya, and what they have defined as the core values, which should be setting the tone for the culture, of the staff and the stakeholders within the ministry. For example, we talk about accountability and transparency. Every member, by that core value, is actually obliged to embrace accountability and transparency. We talk about another core value, say professionalism and ethical practices. And this, I'm sure, are not unique to Ministry of ICT. I'm sure even at Chai Sacco, for example, or Yale Bridges or any other company that is represented in this webinar, you'll agree with me that those are quite common core values: honesty, integrity, okay, efficiency, and effectiveness. And there is one more core value that we at ICRAL, we really emphasize on to our stakeholders. That is, patriotism, where we say, we only have one country, and this country, we must protect its cyberspace passionately, because if we destroy it, we'll have nowhere to run to. So defining these core values will actually shape the thinking, the behavior, of staff within an organization, from the time they're onboarding the organization, how they conduct, their routine activities, and even once they leave that organization. I've seen in a lot of organizations, some of these key performance indicators of culture are actually embedded within the appraisal processes of staff. Okay. For example, you might be put to book that you had questionable integrity, where your use of company's resources was questionable. Okay, where there was an obvious indication of conflict of interest. You are an IT system admin, and we've seen sometimes these people are running their small ICT consultancies within the organizations. Obviously bringing a conflict of interest. So in short, what I'm saying is that the people within the organization are very key towards perpetrating the core values of the organization, which form the backbone of that organizational culture. Okay, if you went to say a Christian or a faith-based organization, there are those values which they believe will shape the culture of the staff and the processes within that faith-based organization. Say a bank such as a bank such as, say, Cooperative Bank. There's a culture that they've put within the staff and even their customers, to have a uniform platform for conducting the business, and also improving on the business performance. So, by and large, because the human beings are the ones that practice culture. Culture belongs to human beings, actually. It doesn't belong to technology. And the human beings or the people also forming the last line of defense. We saw previously that what Robert mentioned, that cyber attackers would like to compromise the easiest component, and that is the human being. That is why we've seen most cyber attacks are actually going the social engineering way, what he mentioned as phishing, and others. So the executive, just like Kevin said, really have a role in terms of embedding that cyber-aware culture within the organizations, which then again needs to be translated into various, operational and tactical instruments, basic things such as procedures, okay? Talk about an SOP. How does our standard operating procedure guide us to maintain a cyber-aware culture? Okay, are we able, do we know that, for example, if you've acquired a new business application, that we need to subject it to vulnerability assessment and testing to see if it has got any vulnerabilities that can compromise our business? That should be a culture within our, within our SOPs. If we have guests coming to our organization, contractors, service providers, and so on, we have a culture of really finding out who they are. Most organizations, I think, have got this policy or this procedure of guests being booked and being accompanied by their hosts from point A to point B, so that you are sure that they're not going to compromise our information, because we've seen where our culture is not very strong. A guest comes to the office and you take 2 minutes break to go to the washroom, for example, or to maybe get him or her a glass of water. And while you're away for 1 or 2 minutes, this man or this lady in your office will get his 16 MB pixel camera and take a nice snapshot of an office memo, and share it with the public. Those are things about culture that if we are not cyber aware, then will really compromise our organization. So yes, the executive have the major role of setting the tone, and every user has a responsibility as well of practicing that culture to the letter. Thank you. Cephas, are you there?
Yeah, sorry. So I was, while I was on mute, I was saying that culture is built for people, not people for culture. That is a point you've driven home very well. But remaining at the strategic level, and Robert, you can jump in here as well as Kevin, that security culture needs to begin at the top. First and foremost, cybersecurity is owned by the management. I mean, I think all of us would agree in that applies now to security culture, and it has to start at the top. But then there's the other aspect that security culture has an impact on security compliance. It has an impact on the security pocket. It has an impact on the business bottom line and many other aspects. At the same time, security culture is very important to support the overall organizational business culture. And that's why even it has to start at the top at the same time. But Robert, you can jump in here and just give us your perspective or your thoughts about engaging in security culture conversation or programs at the strategic level, particularly when you're looking at why it will be important for compliance and the security state of the organization.
Thank you. I was trying to unmute myself. Just allow me to just go slightly back and say the answer as to who owns the security culture in an organization is a bit hard. As much as, yes, the buck will obviously stop at the executive. But yes, as individuals, as people who work in that organization, we also have a big role. In fact, we have the biggest role to play. But that said, as the executive, assume now you are given the responsibility as the executive. You might be the chairman, you might be the CEO, you might be the top person in the organization. And of course, you've got a team. What is it that you need to do so that people can embrace or develop the right security culture that we are talking about? Number one, there is nothing as hard as dealing with people, because people, you see today Robert behaves the right way. He goes home or you know, goes home, meets something on the way, or he meets somebody on the way who tempts him to be a conduit to hacking in an organization. Tomorrow he comes, the same Robert who was very good yesterday. Tomorrow is a different person. He's the one who has given the backdoor to a hacker who is now demanding ransom from an organization. As the executive, the question is, how do I ensure that Robert does not change positions today, tomorrow, and the day after? So I look at it in a soft way again. It's not that now the executive will carry a whip and whip everybody who is not behaving or whose culture is not in tandem with the organization culture. It's got to be a soft way of doing it. Number one, you don't even start from up there in terms of security. You know, you don't do this, you don't do this, you don't do this. You've got to make people feel like they belong, like they own the well-being of the organization. How do you make people own? How do you make everybody a watchman? How do you make everybody a security person in an organization? That is the big question. So in my opinion, I think the environment where everybody is working, it does not matter if it is the junior most person or the senior most person, they should enjoy that environment. That when they think that tomorrow I will come and this environment is not there, they will shatter or they will do everything possible to ensure that environment is maintained or improved further. You do that by, you know, treating everybody fairly in the organization. Let everybody's voice be heard, even the youngest, even the junior most. Create room for sharing ideas. You cannot say now, I'm the CIO, I'm the security officer, you know, I'm the CISO, and what I say is law. Like we have seen, it's everybody. Security is everybody in the organization. So make everybody feel like their opinion is taken into consideration. Make people feel that they belong and they own the organization. Let people know their value in the organization. That is the only way we can be able to, you know, and accept people's varied opinions. You know, why am I saying this? Because you will find a lot of this work of security has been left to ICT. And people call ICT personnel or experts antisocial, right? That they are happy with their computers and not, you know, they think everybody is stupid. So if we are expecting to win the war, where we bring everybody into the same rhythm, the same dance that I was using before, then we must ensure everybody feels like that. And a lot of things that needs to be done in organizations to make people feel that they're treated fairly is, you know, don't have the gap between the least paid and the highest paid so big that somebody feels, no, this is unfair. Don't discriminate in terms of benefits. If there are benefits that the organization gives, like staff loans, let everybody get staff loans. If there are things like healthcare, let everybody be included, so that you don't have classes within the organization that are disgruntled and others are very happy, because it is the disgruntled class that will now open a door for security breaches to occur. So I look at it from, first of all, that point of fair treatment, make people own the organization and such like. Now, come to number two. You can have people who are willing, who are ready to protect the organization, but they don't know how. So ensure you empower people by training them. You know, I am very sure some organizations don't even know how phishing happens. How is it perpetuated? Okay, or what to look out for? Because like Kevin was saying earlier on, you cannot tell people don't open attachments. What about those attachments that are supposed to be worked on? So you've got to tell them, look, if you see an attachment that looks like this, or you receive an attachment that is talking, you know, don't just be quick to open, don't be, you know. So that training is important to everybody. It's not just training about what to do and what. Assume, for example, somebody wants to attack the organization through the printers, or what is it, the UPS that is connected to the network. Then even the cleaner who comes very early in the morning, you should be able to, you know, alert whoever is around that, look, I came and I found the printer is on, when every evening when we are supposed to go home, it's supposed to be off, you know. Then those are things that once you train people, then you have like deployed several security people to take care of your security. For now, that is what I'm thinking of. And if I think for something else, I'll be able to say.
Fascinating. You've spoken about a very important aspect of security culture. And this is something that is really promoted, I know, in very big quarters, that security culture, or rather even security awareness, has to be done in such a way that it aligns with the human nature. Because the moment you start doing or running programs or running activities to build cultural awareness that tend to conflict with the natural way of thinking and the natural habits of people, it actually makes it very difficult for people to change, because change is a difficult thing to take. But I guess that's a whole conversation to have. But let me bring in Kevin and Steve. I think Steve is already in the room here, and
Safas, maybe before I proceed, I wish to react to what Robert has just mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think from from where I sit, from my experience, and also my social science approach, which I use a lot in terms of embracing effective cybersecurity solutions. I think if you look at a commercial organization, for example, the bottom line is, we know the bottom line is the figures. How much more are we making in terms of revenue? How much more savings are we realizing from, non-disruptive activities and so on and so forth? So this matters, cybersecurity must be taken very seriously. So whereas Robert would prefer, softer ways of, building a culture of cybersecurity, I would wish to add that sometimes you need to also adopt the other motivations, especially for non-compliance, which includes enforcement. To be honest, you all agree with me, and whoever disagrees with me is also open another kind of another window for discussion. that enforcement, where people know that, this act of omission or commission will lead to this appropriate disciplinary action. People, will try to adopt more compliance to this. We are talking about average people who will not follow instructions. We talk about people who have been given, procedures to follow, to embed the culture. But, willingly or unwillingly, they'll opt not to follow them and so on and so forth. So I think that aspect we must also look at it. It might not be a pleasant motivation factor, but sometimes it's a necessary one, to embed culture. We've seen even on other matters, embracing on, strategic interests, enforcement works well. Thank you.
Earlier on, you had talked about KPIs in appraisals and also security requirements, whether in contracts or SLAs or on onboarding documentation for employees. That when you're hiring an employee, you need to be straight up with the kind of security behavior that you want. And if that is not met, then the same reflection will be in the appraisal, so the quarterly or the monthly, whatever appraisal you want to do. Those KPIs will be able to give an indication of the kind of personal culture that an employee has. I think enforcement is a very important way, and you might end up having a hybrid model where you are doing enforcement, but you're also doing reinforcements through education and awareness and communication and the other aspects. Okay, yeah. You have also indicated two very important aspects: the strategic interest and the bottom line. And honestly, I think we all know that putting in a business case for cybersecurity is always difficult. When you ask, are we safe? Are we spending enough? Are we getting return on investment on our cybersecurity investments? And questions like those. Bring the same ideas to security culture. I know there will be a budget for security, and security culture will just be a component of the whole security budget. But then, how does security culture really support the business side of things, be it the bottom line or be it the organizational culture? And Kevin and the rest of the guys, feel free to respond to this. Steve as well, if you can hear me, you feel free to respond to that. And at the same time, what will be the challenges or some of the stumbling blocks that people can practically experience when it comes to promoting security culture? Kevin?
Thank you for that. I hope I'm clear. You can hear me? I look at it from, how do you do a proper sustainable security culture? One thing is, how are you communicating to the ExCos about this agenda that you're having of embedding the culture in terms of putting the right technology into the place? Because I'm thinking, okay, I'm trying to push in for an email security solution so that we stop phishing from coming in. Just like you mentioned, what is the value proposition of this that you want to boost? So this has also to come from what Robert has said is, do you even have a cybersecurity strategy as an organization? Because you can't just, hop from one solution to another. You need to have a strategic plan where your cybersecurity is going, so that if cybersecurity culture is one of the things that is part of your strategy, then how do you make and actualize that? Now, again, I'll look at it from the aspect of, do you have advocates within the ExCos? Are there people within the board of directors who understand? Does the management have, the capability of being able to understand what are the risks that the business can face? So there are those, kind of a down-home passion for making things secure, because the advocates understand that these people you have selected to champion the cybersecurity culture within the organization. So basically, those are just, the easy way to make this thing work, because you all want to do one thing: gather the folks together, bring them, communicate effectively, reach out to people outside there. If you can't do it, reach out to people who can come and, talk to your team about, how to embed this culture. Because trust you me, it's not easier spoken, but the organization, the governance, the policies in place, the technology in place has to align to a common goal of how do you calculate culture, because we see organizations having very nice cybersecurity policies, but when it comes to conformity of this policy to embedding the culture, that is where we have a break, a link which is breaking the cybersecurity structure with the business. So if the business core values, just like David has mentioned, does not align into cybersecurity, because what we see most of the time is security is an afterthought to most leaders. So how can we again talk of a culture if it's not part of our agenda? Here, the CFO will just tell you what he just wants to hear is about, the numbers, the profits. But again, how can the profit be broken down by somebody sitting, in their mother's, basement? It's because of the organization does not really understand the threats. But to me, I believe communication is very key in making sure that the cybersecurity works at the end of the day. So build on the skills of your people in terms of they might be able to identify the value of having these, culture in cybersecurity, and, do a one-on-one meeting, train them, fish them, so that they be able to understand. And it's not just about fishing. How do you make sure that the processes are aligned to security, to a secure protocols? How do you make sure that the CIA, like David has mentioned, confidentiality, the availability, integrity, it's all merged into a cybersecurity culture. So it comes from all aspects, but you have to be very strategic. You have to know exactly what you're doing. Otherwise, you'll have a compliance, but you'll still be breached because the culture is not calculated down. So that's my insight on that.
Yeah, fascinating. A very important question someone has raised here privately, that is security culture good for business? And is security culture a business advantage? I guess any one of you can respond to that. Steve, also, if you have some comments, feel free to unmute you. What?
Okay, Cephas, allow me to also add to what Kevin has just said. How do we convince the executive, the decision makers, to spend on security culture? It is one of the toughest things to do, because security does not bring a direct income that at the end of the month we say from security we have received 1 million shillings, which is what the other revenue channels show. So if for example a marketing person goes ahead and says, look, we ran a marketing campaign. From that campaign, we spent 1 million. We have received 20 million. So we are asking you, give us 2 million. We will we are expecting to receive double. Everybody, nobody, even the hardest of them all, will say, go ahead and spend. It's not the same case with security. So, like Kevin was starting to say, it needs a lot. One of them is goodwill at the executive. So how do you do this? You prepare the ground, I am sure where in your position, wherever you are, you know who are pro and anti. So you go to the pro and, convince them, even before you make it official in terms of what you need to spend. Then that is part of preparing the ground. Like a good farmer, you don't just go and plant in a heap of grass that is grown. You've got to prepare that ground first, plow it, repeat the plowing, and then you can be able to do what? Plant. And you don't just plant when it is a dry season. You plant when you anticipate rain. So don't go right now. I'm saying now, don't go right now to your exco and say, let's spend now. already you are earning half salary because of COVID. You know everything is so tight. You will not get a positive response. So prepare your ground, and part of the preparation is, you know, talking to the your agenda, then bring in experts who are respected in the market to talk to the organ that makes the decision. Then use all means, including the authorities. Like now, for circles, use even SASRA, who are the authorities, and that come like you know, a policy from that point. Then finally, when you now get the opportunity to put, you know, it on paper and voice it, do it in a very simple and clear terms so that people can understand. How do you do this? Show people the cost. You know, of course, the bottom line, like David was saying, every organization is going to look at how much money did I make, or how much am I going to make? So tell them, don't hide, tell them how much it will cost. Then value. And this is where it is very hard. Value the benefits. Don't just say, you know, if we deploy this, we do this, we will not have a ransomware. What is the value? What is the cost of fixing a ransomware attack? Okay? You know, some people don't even see this. You know, show them in a day, for example, if it is one channel that is down, for example, the mobile channel is down because of a disruption of bridge or something, how, by that channel being down alone, how much money are you losing? So that becomes the value that you equate there. And then explain how you are proposing to budget or to finance that budget. If these things are done and done clearly, there is no way you or I will fail to convince the decision makers to spend on security. And finally, you once you are spending, please show the value. Bring out the value. Like now, if, for example, you end up with a SIM, for example, that SIM or that equipment that you have bought that shows you reports is nothing if the reports that you get every day are not acted upon. Okay? So, for example, you see machine A has these vulnerabilities. It needs patching. And you don't do the patching, then what is the value of whatever tool you used to show you, to expose that gap in security? So again, once you have been allowed to spend, ensure that you make use of that tool that you have deployed. Safas, you know, I can talk.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, so yeah, great points there you've mentioned about how we can actually build security awareness and security culture. And as we wrap this up in the next 10 minutes or so, Steve, if you can hear me, please unmute yourself. I don't seem to find you on my screen. But I want us to wrap by sort of packaging everything that we are talking about, or we've talked about, into a framework. And this is something I personally really love, the security culture framework, because culture has all these different aspects. A lot of them soft actually, but a lot of them as well happen in very practical ways. And you guys have given analogies like Robert, you talked about the printer and how a cleaner comes in the morning and they're able to raise an alert that something might have been happening. That is a very soft issue, but it comes out in a very practical way because someone has been conscious enough and they are going ahead to raise an issue, raise an alert, or something of the sort. But the security culture framework is sort of a new approach to developing and nurturing security culture, right? We've gone over a few aspects of what will be sort of the objectives or the goals of a security culture and why it's important. And then, of course, we've spoken a bit about the need for engagement from the top to the ops operational level, management level, and more. We've covered a bit of some of the activities that we could do, and we could actually dwell here as we wrap this up. And I'll bring in David. What are some of the activities that our audience could go ahead and do from tomorrow, in very practical ways? Some of the things that they need to do, to either start a culture or in a way foster a working security culture in your space.
Okay. I think, yes, our audience and even us practitioners, we can hit the ground running. And of course, we can adopt a very simple information security culture framework that addresses the human behavior issues, what we call the human behavior diamond. And this is actually looked at in terms of 4 clear levels. One is preparedness, the other one is responsibility, the other is issues about management, and the last one is about society and regulations. So in terms of preparedness, and I think, again, this is where Robert mentioned that we really need to, have an investment for the preparedness and also demonstrate value for the same. We need to prepare employees to behave securely, okay? To behave securely is almost like to behave normally within the SOPs of cybersecurity. And this can be achieved through training, through awareness, through various ways of knowledge acquisition, and also change in perception. Perception here requires that let all employees know that, cybersecurity is not the responsibility of IT. It's the responsibility of everyone, okay? And that also comes to the next level of the human behavior diamond, which is responsibility, where we need to ensure that employees are behaving securely. And I think we discussed earlier on that through monitoring and control, and those can be part of the KPIs in contracts and so on and so forth, okay? I think Robert also mentioned something in terms of rewards, deterrence, and applicability. All those put together are able to bring that responsibility of every individual to maintain the security culture. Then for management, yes, we must engage them. They must, show commitment. They must communicate effectively. They must also provide adequate resources. It could be human, it could be technical solutions, as well as financial resources and so on. And then lastly, let's also think about our society, okay? There's no organization that operates in silo. Just like Robert mentioned that within SACO, you also operate within certain regulations from SASRA. So let's look at, the industry within which we operate. What are they doing? Let's look at the ethical conduct. What's the government doing in terms of other initiatives to support the security culture? Okay, you see, there is Safaricom is all over the place. Social media, on print and electronic TV. Sending us SMSs in terms of don't share your PIN. Don't respond to calls from this conmen, and so on and so forth. So embracing all those 4 levels of preparedness, responsibility, management, and the other one which are called society and regulations would actually help us to, jumpstart and to further, embrace information security culture within organizations. Thank you.
Fascinating. That is wonderful. I love I personally love the diamond model. And I think one of the biggest aspects of security culture is social science. And I think every security professional out there should try and dig in on the security social science, organizational behavior, and issues of communication and marketing, psychology itself. So if you're listening to us out there, please explore some of those areas, because a lot of those concepts are happening, are being used to build and nurture security awareness, including marketing, because of late, a lot of people are pushing security culture as a marketing campaign. It's literally using marketing concepts of perception, marketing concepts of brand loyalty and things like those. So, Kelvin, you have any comments you want to share? If you can hear me,
Yeah,
please,
sure.
just go ahead and chime in.
Okay, for us to
Yes,
be able
Kelvin.
to build this culture into the organization is, first of all, trying to bring each and every person into the common organizational goal of what is the cybersecurity strategy we have, because you cannot really go into any place without a direction. So first of all, to me, is why don't you just perform a simple gap analysis? Engage people like Bridge, come and do a phishing test. Understand first of all what is the weakest link, because we have this concept of SWOT. SWOT does not apply only in business. In business, it also comes into cybersecurity, where you have to look at the strength, you have to look at weaknesses, opportunities, what are the threats you're facing. So then, after doing that analysis, can you define your goals? What do you want to achieve with this strategy? Because that will define two things. It will as-is analysis and the gap analysis. As-is analysis is, yes, we have done this kind of assessment. We have identified this is our gap, and we need to align it to business strategy. Then again, awareness. I will always say, do it weekly. Fish your employees. Don't need to crucify them. Just tell them, you have clicked this, enroll them to a program, make your awareness away from PowerPoint, make them, something exciting, share with them, and also in terms of the governance role that they need to play. As a CISO, you have a role to make sure that there is a communicational channel in between, the excos, the business, what the business is doing to make sure that the user is protected. We can't call them the weakest link. And where you sit as a CISO or a board of director, you have not even procured a single, perimeter security around your people. Yes, they will be fished, but what can you do to stop this fishing from coming? So we really, for me, it's just those three approaches. Analyze your gaps, vis-a-vis the as-is analysis, then define your roles, put them in a strategy, map them with with the organization policies. And at that point, you'll be able to be secure, because security has to be practical. It has to be proven. You have to implement them. So the moment we continue to talk about policies and we don't actualize them, that is why the number of attacks continue to happen. Why? Because you're just doing things for formalities. You don't actualize security. You only, want to, we call them like be a flower security kind of a girl, where you feel like, you're just showing, but actually you've not done anything about your house. So clean your house. Don't go beyond the cybersecurity ABCs. Don't think about a SIM. Don't think about what. Just do the basics, implement them, and you'll be able to achieve that journey. So for me, that is it. That's the insight I have. Thank you.
Okay, interesting. And the same situation happens in culture, actually. Putting in policies for the sake of compliance is the same thing. You can put in policies to try and drive a culture, but policies don't count as much as actually taking action. Making sure you follow up with people and putting in communities that will be able to keep pushing the message. So as a parting shot, Robert, you can probably give some comments around the issue of measuring cultures, because again, you'll put up something, but you need to be able to measure to know how you're doing. How can we or how can the audience measure and improve security culture?
Thank you, Sir Fasil. Allow me to answer a question I've seen on the chat about how much is the right amount when investing on cybersecurity. How much? I'm sure nobody will tell me the amount in this panel or outside there. But like Kevin and David have said before, and even yourself, Cephas, you've got to start somewhere. And that place will be the things that sometimes don't need money to implement. One of them is awareness and training. How much money, David, do you need to train your staff, your users, about how to be careful when receiving emails and, you know? Zero. I'll tell you, zero. How much do you need to let people know that when you leave the server room door open, you are actually exposing the servers that are in there into intrusion? People can just walk in and even pour water on the server and cause security breach. So awareness is the first thing you need to do. Then I think it is Kevin who said, do an inventory of your assets. Sorry, guys. Let me switch off this phone. Sorry. How much does it take or cost you to do an inventory on your assets, that you are aware, I've got this number of printers, I've got this number of IP phones, and these are their IPs, you know? Those are quick wins that you can do and then be able to how much will it cost, you know, to do things that you normally look to be basic but are important in security. But again, I am very aware that middle-level organizations, we are not talking about Safaricoms of this world, where you'll find there is one person whose work is to go through the AD logs. He comes to the office. What they do is Active Directory logs is what they just check and go home. Some of us are multitasking, doing everything. We are a network, we are programmers, we are, you know, so with all those things, activities going on, how do I get to take care of security? This is where now you look for tools. This is where you look for, you can even outsource that bit of security to partners like Yellbridge, you know, tell them, me at the end of the day, I need a report telling me from my Active Directory, how many people changed their passwords, why were they changing, you know, if that is there. From my firewall, let me see who tried to come in and you know, through what channel. From my endpoint, let me have, you know, where there is, you know, malware and stuff like this. So with this, as you can be a one-man guitar in an organization, that you are the security guy, you are the system administrator, and you are, you know, simply because in security, you just check the reports that somebody else has taken time to filter and show you. Then go further, like David was saying, go further to compliance with authorities, and then even further to even secure yourself more. The last time I was here, we talked about cybersecurity insurance. This will be like after everything has been done, you cannot guarantee 100% security of your organization. So where do you go last? If, for example, there is an attack, you lose money, what do? Then you can go to insurance. And insurance will not be so much money as long as you have put measures yourself. Measures like we have said, you put some logs, you can be able to, the culture is good, people are trained. So that really, even whoever is checking can say they did everything. Whoever was able to go through this culture, this system, nobody could have stopped them.
Yeah, thank you, Robert. Any thoughts from David and Kevin on the issue of measuring an improvement? Because again, it has to be a sustainable effort.
I think I can jump in, Cephas.
Yes, go ahead.
You can hear me. Two things is kindly what I can urge the audience is do a continuous assessment of your users, because these are the threats that they can be exposed to. So make it continuous, make it a program. So if you feel like maybe the organization does not have a capability of doing that, right now they even offer, there are organizations that can give you, security culture as a service. What do I mean is we do phishing to your users, then we send you the report of the most, the most risky users. Another thing is, measure the metrics. Like I said initially, when you say as is analysis tells us that, we have like 80% of clicks. So how do you measure the time you plug in automation? Because for us to make sure that the security culture has been calculated inside the organization, what I can say is, why don't you automate this so that you continue doing this kind of, measurement in terms of metrics? That is when you can go to the management and say to them, I've been able to reduce the number of phishing attacks for 80%. So such kind of metrics will really help you to know that exactly we are heading somewhere. So for me, that is how I will approach in terms of measuring the metrics. And also in terms of leadership, the last bit is how is the leadership in terms of the budget investments that they are doing this security culture, like how much are they willing to set aside and say this particular budget will go for to build our culture? Because this is the only thing you cannot outsource. I can outsource the service, but I cannot outsource my culture. I have to build it within the people. So thank you that is for me.
That's a very good point. You have to build it. David?
Thank you. Hey, mine is going to be brief because I believe that what you need to manage, you must measure. So if you need to embed and manage the cybersecurity culture, you must have, a structured way of measuring. That requires that we need to have certain set of metrics around, the strategy, around the technology, around the people, around the management, around the environment, and so on and so forth. And with those metrics, culture is a way in which you are trying to create a civilization, as I call it. So once you are able, of course, from the as-is analysis, we need to know how we are at the moment, and you define where you need to be, maybe in the current financial year, in the next 3 years, in the next 5 years. Then now, taking adequate remedial measures for where the culture is not meeting expectations, so that you continuously improve the situation. As in, you adopt a continual improvement model for culture within the organization. Thank you.
All right, fantastic. So that kind of wraps it up for us today. I'll just give a brief of what I've noted and heard today. I think it's all of us agree that culture is important, and there are very many ways you can approach culture. The same way in organizational management, have different approaches to culture. You can actually use those as a basis to define your own security culture approach. But generally, let me try and open my notes here. Generally, we agree that there are very many different aspects to culture, from belief to value systems, behavior, and all of these are meant to drive actions, and they define the way we do the things within our own spaces and organizations. Some of the analogies you guys share were very powerful as to reflect personal and individual responsibility and actions, and why culture is a collective issue and at the same time is a very personalized issue. And then, of course, we know culture is generally for the people. It's not people for the culture, because it's the people who have to build, and they're the same people who have to use and nurture the culture. And this has to start with wenye kampuni, because it has to start from the top and cascade and also go horizontal across the organization. It's important to engage at the strategic level. And Robert, you're very kind enough as to share some tactics to use to engage or communicate the need for, the importance, and the other details about security and the culture aspect of it. And execs, it's important that you engage your executive level, even when developing the culture. They have to be involved at that strategic level. It's important that all of us look at all of these also from a business perspective, and how it will impact not just the business culture, the organization culture, but also the bottom line, because we want figures at the end of the day. And there are many practical ways of doing that. There are very practical ways that culture comes to life. And it starts from the simple things, the simple awareness or situational awareness, not making sure that you're not piggybacked, making sure that you're not tailgated, and things like those. And then, of course, from my own side, I think adopting a risk attitude is important, and putting people at the center of the risk attitude or the risk culture is very important. Automation, outsourcing, ensuring that there is ownership across the board from top down and horizontally as well is important. And strategy, as Kelvin had mentioned, is key. And I think it all starts with strategy anyway. It's cybersecurity, then the strategy, then culture comes as a component of that as well. So strategy and governance is very important. So, and then of course you have to measure, you have to ensure that you keep tabs on what is happening and find opportunities to improve and communicate that as well with your people and the team and the management going forward. So that is my take on everything. If anyone, David, Robert, or Kevin, if you have any last word you want to give, you can do it in a few seconds.
So just to wrap it up to the audience is how do we counteract cybercrime? How do we stop this? Because what we need to do is, to achieve a security culture, awareness must be created. That is just as simple as that. If employees know how to behave securely, it's the company that benefits and it becomes more secure. So cultivate your culture by building your people to understand how they can behave. If you're not able to do it, I'll tell you, for you to be able to understand the user's behavior, because attacks are changing, what you need to do is automate how to build, have a solution that will send those policies, have a solution that will be able to tell you that this is the weakest link. So automation is where we are going even into making it work. So I'll tell you, just automate, and that is the best way you can, combat cybercrime. Thank you.
Fantastic. Before David and Robert join in, Lisa said here that you must communicate to employees the organizational cybersecurity and compliance standards, as well as best practices and expectations. If you do not, you cannot properly measure compliance or hold employees accountable for their actions. All employees should have ready access to policies, resources, information from a knowledge base, their senior managers. Fascinating, yeah. The famous management, I think it's Peter Drucker or something. He said, "Culture eats strategy for breakfast." As much as you want to communicate policies and things like those, you need to be able to build a culture, because a friend of mine, a good friend of mine, normally says cybersecurity is about people, people, people. So, Kevin, you're spot on. Let's build our people. Robert, David.
Yeah, thank you, Cephas. I want to finish by saying the more we automate, or the more we digitalize our working, our activities, our processes, the more we expose ourselves to cybersecurity. What does that mean? That, they are not, how do we say? It's not like when one is growing, the other one is reducing. It is as one grows, the other one also grows. So we need more and more people. We need, actually there is a group where Kevin and I belong called Cybersecurity Evangelists. Our work should be to evangelize cybersecurity every day. We wake up, we sleep, so that we can be able to match to the breaches that everybody is trying to do. And measuring, like my team has said, is it's got to be measurable by assessments. If you assessed and found 10 gaps, the next time you do an assessment, you should have less. Then you can say, look, I've moved from 10 to now 4 gaps, okay? But again, like we are saying, the more you automate, the more gaps that come up, and we need to continue doing this. So if I was to advise young people, the field to go to, cybersecurity is one of the widest, most important field to go. And I think I've done David's job for nothing. David, you'll talk to me later on.
Yeah, good point, Robert. Let's build our people again. I guess there are 3 aspects to people here. One is the people who build the solutions that we use. These are people, whether it's coders, secure developers, and all that. Those are people. The threat actors. There are people somewhere around the world who are attacking our systems, who think, who have minds and who lives lives like we live. I mean, it's people, and there are also people who are defenders in organizations. So these are 3 sets of people. So you realize that cybersecurity is just at the center, and it's about people, and then of course people are the last line of defense. Once your technology fails, the person who will save you is the people, the defenders, and your users and your staff members. David, any last word?
Thank you very much. Yeah, automation is a good point. However, I tend to believe that automation provides a false sense of, of security. We've seen very sophisticated automated systems, especially with adoption of current emerging technologies like artificial intelligence, machine learning, and so on and so forth. They're just trying to simulate, the people's behavior. We've also seen a lot of corporations, really understanding people's culture. If Safaricom, for example, knows that your culture is, you always have a lot of M-Pesa to send at a particular time, maybe end month or on Friday, and so on and so forth, then you'll see communication coined in that respect. So my last point is that let us adopt, a custom-made culture for our organizations. Let's avoid a copy-paste tendency, which most of us like going for, and let's focus on building our people, because culture, building culture is like getting a civilization. Let's set the pace. This is what we want. This is what we want for our organization. This is how we want our people to behave. This is the kind of practices we want our people to perfect. So that will inform the best technologies, the best management skills, and the best any other components that will improve the cyber aware culture in organizations. Thank you.
Absolutely. It is famously say that people don't leave organizations because of the job. It's because either because of the boss, a bad boss, or a bad culture. And yesterday, a friend of mine from South Africa was telling me a story of I think some years ago. She came on an interview in Safaricom for the CISO role, and she was actually given the job, but she turned it down purely because of the culture. She found the culture not very fitting to her, and she ended up turning down the position. So that's how important culture is, and security culture is important because cyber insecurity is real, it's growing, and we all need to defend ourselves. So having said that, thank you everyone for coming around, but specifically thank you to Robert, David, and Kevin for sticking with us, for sharing your insights. Thank you for the experience. I loved the analogies myself. I've actually taken 2 pages of notes here. And I hope to be hosting you guys also as well in the future. To our audience, hope we all have learned a lot, because I have. Check out some of the interesting things like the cyber harm model and the human what is it? The human, sorry, I've forgotten. Yes, the human diamond model as well, and security framework, security culture framework. I think I'm gonna share the link in the chat, and check some of those tools or some of those approaches and strategic thinking tools. I think they are very important. Now, my goal today was really not to focus on the typical let's use flyers in security awareness, let's put up messages on doors and everything. No, my thinking today was to approach security culture from more of a philosophical, fundamental, and a thought perspective, rather than the actual practical things that we can do. But I hope generally we have learned a lot, and we can join the dots, and hopefully you can start taking some action in our different spaces. So thank you, and all of us have a lovely weekend. I would like to welcome Lisa to close for us this session. Lisa?
Let me first thank
Lisa, we're having difficulty hearing you. Could you try again?
Hear me now?
Yes, that's better.
Okay, good. So let me just thank the panelists on behalf of Yale Bridges for an engaging and worthwhile conversation. I mean, it's very obvious that our panelists are extremely knowledgeable in their field and can link this knowledge up to a very great discussion. To our participants, you're more than welcome to express interest in taking up a panel role whenever your schedule allows in the upcoming webinar. So thank you very much and enjoy your weekend. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.